welcome back, Sierra Vista Baptist Church. Pastor Matt. We are continuing our study of 2 Peter. We are in chapter 2, verses 13 through 14. As always, we want to read the context, so read 1 through 12, and then join me here at 13. Verse 13 says, "They will be paid back with harm for the harm they have done. They consider it a pleasure to carouse in broad daylight. They are spots and blemishes, delighting in their deceptions while they feast with you. They have eyes full of adultery that never stop looking for sin. They seduce unstable people and have hearts trained in greed, children under a curse." Man, this is a hard-hitting passage. It's continuing to talk about the character of false teachers, false prophets. And so we want to observe the text. Now, remember how I told you in the past that when we have red, it's a type of a verb. So you can see all the red that I have marked here. And what is pretty startling is that this whole sentence is red. Now, in this sentence in the Greek, we see that it's a verb and two nouns. But it's also kind of a play on words. And essentially, it's kind of like that they will be paid back. Maybe a good metaphor would be being defrauded of the wages of fraud, right? It's they are being taken advantage of because they took advantage of someone else, or the wages that they got through sinful gain, they're losing, something like that. So it's kind of a play on words, but basically the false teachers have entered into the church, and they are really trying hard to take advantage of Christians. And we see that they have entered into this congregation that Peter is writing to, and they're trying to take advantage. And so as they're taking advantage, they're trying to make some money out of it. They're really feeding their baser habits, their fleshly habits. So we see right off the bat that they will be paid back for the harm for the harm they have done. They're going to get their just deserts. They consider it a pleasure to carouse in broad daylight. Man, this image what we see here is people dancing around in their birthday suits, doing whatever they want in the open, and they think it's such a great thing. How many of you have been around a very drunk person who is just giggling and laughing and just being so obnoxiously open about their sinful behavior? That's the image that we get here. And so these false teachers are acting like there is no judgment. And we as Christians could be very tempted to think, man, that these people are not going to get their just deserts. Now, Peter's not specifically talking about a pastor, but think about some pastors who go into a church and openly just act sinfully. And they act as if it's not a big deal. What this is teaching us is that it is a big deal, and they are going to receive the harm back for the harm that they have done. It's not going to be pleasant. And though they're enjoying being out in the open and carousing in broad daylight, they are going to face very strict judgment. So these false teachers are also described, they are spots and blemishes. Now, if you look at it, it could be like they're pimples. These people are pimples in your on your face. And because they are pimples, they're blemishes, they're something that makes it less than attractive, right? They're really an ugly spot, disfiguring, or maybe even painful. And so it's a negative thought. It's kind of like a pimple on the character of Christ and the church because of their behavior. And we see that. We see that the biggest damage to Christianity is usually by false teachers, by Christians or people who claim to be Christians, who then go about and carouse and live extremely poorly. What I want to highlight is also this word pleasure. We know that sin entices people with the offer of pleasure. We don't sin because we think it's going to hurt us, or we don't sin because we think it's bad. We sin when we see something that seems pleasurable, right? Sex and adultery appear to be a pleasurable thing. Greed is a pleasurable desire. However, with that pleasure comes a hook, and we see that Satan hides a hook in all these sinful pleasures, and we get hooked into it. So with alcohol, we have the same response. And these are spots that blemishes, they're pimples, and they delight in their deceptions. So these folks are openly deceiving us, and they're hanging out as we feast, right? They are feasting with us. They're enjoying the benefits of being associated with the church, which is interesting because in Peter's time, the church wasn't necessarily thought of as like some kind of great place or a social club. It was actually kind of dangerous because of what it looks like. But these people have entered in, they're trying to take advantage, and they're probably giggling a little bit inside about the deception that they've done, how they've tricked people. And we get this real, maybe evil vibe from as we read this. Verse 14, they have eyes full of adultery. Oh my goodness. That never stop looking for sin. What we know about the character of sin is that it continually wants to feed, right? When we give way to our anger, we are going to be much more susceptible to anger. When we give way to our lust, we are going to be more susceptible to lust. Adultery never satisfies. We are never satisfied with adultery. We never stop looking for sin. This is kind of a eyes full of adultery is kind of a compressed phrase for always looking for a woman with whom to commit adultery. Those people who are always on the lookout for new sexual conquest. It's kind of like a person who just really loves cars. Imagine someone who really loves cars, and they're always looking out the window trying to see the different cars that are coming through, especially like a kid who has just gotten into cars, and he's looking and trying to see what new cars he can see. Well, in the same way, sin traps us and entices us to continue to do this. And so these false teachers have infiltrated the church. They are taking advantage of the church. And as they have taken advantage of the church, they're continuing to look for more opportunities to do that. That's why it's so important for us as a church to have meaningful church membership, which means that you belong to a body and you're held accountable. And a lot of these false teachers don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to be held accountable to elders. They want to be the elder. They want to take advantage. They want to maybe make money off of their position. And so we as the church have to be aware that there are going to be false teachers, just like there were false prophets in the Old Testament, who enter into the church and have the appearance of beauty. They come as an angel of light, maybe they're attractive or charismatic or fun or any other number of things, and they come into the church and they trick people, and they use these false teachings and these false doctrines, and the fruit of that can be seen in their lives. And it could be small things like a insatiable lust or a insatiable desire for more money. And so we have to be aware as a church. 14, we're continuing. They seduce unstable people. So the antidote is not just looking out for these folks and removing them, But the antidote is also to train up our people to identify true and false doctrine. Our people need to be experts in the gospel. This is the importance of discipleship. We don't want to have a church member, a church family, who doesn't know what it means to be saved or how to share the gospel. And the gospel is something that is simple, but also so complex, right? We know that we were created perfect, without sin, without blemish, and yet human beings sinned, and then we've inherited that sinful guilt, and we have continued that family legacy of sin in our lives. And there's no way that we could have removed that family legacy. We could never have been adopted into God's family. Yet Christ came to die. He lived the perfect life. God himself had to come and be man in order that we could be saved, and the guilt and the shame was removed. So God created us. We sin. Christ came. And then our response to Christ coming is to follow him in trust. We need to trust him. And we have to lay our own selfishness aside and fall in on this free gift of salvation. And that's the gospel in a nutshell. And there's so many varied aspects of it, and it affects everything in our lives, because no longer are we trying to earn salvation. No longer are we trying to be good on the inside and think we're good and work to be good, and maybe our good and our bad outweigh each other. No, none of that. Fully Christ. That's who we have to rely on. That's who we have to trust in. His work on the cross is all the works that we need. And so we lean into that in our lives, and he is the one who transforms us and changes us through the power of the Spirit. And so we have to learn that basic, because this is what false teachers do. They play on guilt or shame or some type of works and try to say, well, you have to give, 50% of your money to the church in order for you to be saved. Or they'll say something like, you can be saved if you do these good works, right? And that's bogus. We know that it is Christ and Christ alone that saves, and it's only through his work on the cross. And we must just trust in his saving work. We see that in the Old Testament as we see it in the New Testament. The Old Testament relied on trusting in Yahweh's power, and we're reading that in Joshua, aren't we? And so these unstable people, or these false teachers, they're trying to trick unstable people, and they have their hearts trained in greed, children under a curse. So from this passage, we see the danger of sin, we see the glory of Christ, and we see the what's going to happen to these false teachers, and we can identify their bad character. Thanks for joining me, and until we see each other again, God bless and take care.